So welcome everybody to the second of our Duncan and Topless webinars, which are considering the impact of environmental, social and governance, or ESG, on our businesses. I am Sally-Anne Hurn, an Assurance Associate Director here at Duncan and Topless. I'm also part of the sustainability team here, and I'm a key part of developing client services in this area. I've been working in the project team since the beginning of the year, and I believe it's a key part of Duncan and Topless's journey. We have a real understanding that companies are facing increasing expectations from different stakeholders to be proactive in managing their ESG risks and opportunities as part of their wider strategies. We also believe that this should not only generate returns in the here and now, but also create and deliver sustainable value for the future. Earlier this month, we held our first webinar, and I'm pleased to say that E for environmental can be found on our website under the news section. For those of you who have not had the opportunity to see this yet, we looked at how to properly communicate your sustainability targets and emission reduction plans to avoid greenwashing and further reduce carbon footprint, and also how marketing and communications can help to reduce carbon footprint. I had the pleasure of guest speakers Caroline Cleary, the Marketing Director here at Duncan and Topless, and also Banner from Net Zero Now. And they talked about some of the environmental considerations that businesses may look to consider. So on to the second of our webinars. So today we're moving on to S for social. We hope that each speaker will be able to share their interpretations, experiences, knowledge around starting to formulate your ESG policies, and how to define and improve offerings and relationships with team members and the communities in which we operate. The speakers today are the Head of HR and Payroll here at Duncan and Topless, Heidi Thompson, and also the Director and Trustee of the Duncan and Topless Foundation, Niall Kingsley. Heidi and Neil will be happy to take any questions that you have at the end of the webinar, so please feel free to put them in the Q&A section. If we don't have enough time to answer them all, we will be sure to get back to you as soon as possible after the webinar. Overall, our aim is to make sure that you will have an insight into how businesses can implement social policies and the real benefits to your employees and the wider communities which this can achieve. So without any further delay, I'd like to introduce Heidi Thompson.
Hi everyone, I'm just going to share my slides with you. Can I just check with my panel that the slides are all there? Brilliant, thank you. Okay, let me just, I'm sorry, just have a slight technical issue on my side, but oh yeah, I think we're right to go. Okay, thanks very much everyone. So as Sally said, I'm Heidi Thompson, HR Director for Duncan Topless, and I also head up our payroll and HR services. So I'm really going to be talking to you a bit more, as Sally said, around the S for social aspects. I think we all know the impact of human activity on the planet is undeniable, and we all know that we need to act on that. But I think as businesses, we are also aware that how challenging that can feel, and actually quite overwhelming at times, as to where do you start? How far does it go? What can we do depending on different size of organisations? Is it something that we can all do something with? So this session really, hopefully over the next few slides, I'll be able to share with you some of the small ways that you can start to take some actions, and either if you're at the beginning of the journey or how you can build on that if you're much further along. So I'm just going to move to my next slide. So in order to support this, then I've really broken it down into three aspects, which we can see on the slides there. Sorry. So we've got community engagement, which is links with our community, charitable and local fundraising, volunteering, and Neil's going to be talking a little bit more about that later on as well. We also then have diversity, equality and inclusivity, a really big area in itself, where we can consider how do we manage this big area? What are the strategies that we can use in terms of our policies, procedures, our recruitment, how we interact with our team members, how we ensure we have this diverse workforce and it's working for us, social mobility, and the kind of list goes on in that area. And then also employee well-being, so value-led work practices, how we can make sure that we're supporting mental and physical health for our team members, workplace health and safety, manager development and strong leadership practice, just some of the things that we'll touch on briefly. As you'll see from the slide as well, there's kind of parts that I feel underpin that. So which again, I'll talk about later on. So we've got board level, or your managers or whoever's really in charge of that business. How do we ensure that they are seeing this as the most important thing, that because ultimately it needs to come from the top, and we'll talk about that more as well as stakeholder involvement, how they're engaged, which will be your community, your team members, etc. And underpinning that, I've got values and cultures as an area that again I feel is really critical to this. But again, I will talk about that more as we go along. So firstly then, we're going to cover, as you can see, community engagement, something that, as I mentioned earlier, Neil will cover in a little bit more detail. So the importance of our community should never be underestimated. We don't exist in a vacuum, of course, so it's critical that we are doing good things in the community that we're in. And when we talk about community, that can be our very local area, that can be within the country, worldwide. It's really how we define our own community. And this really can take a lot of different forms. So it's not unusual for companies to offer volunteer days where they are all half a days, where they allow their employees to take time to volunteer for a local project, half a day here, and those things can be really beneficial. But we can also expand that into local projects. Are there areas that you get your whole team or parts of your team involved in different things in the community? It's also a really great way for team building, to enable your team members to learn additional skills that will be very transferable in the workplace as well. So how do we enable them to bring that forward? So when we're really forging those links, hopefully we can find those different ways. But that, I think, can be challenging to start with, is to find where do you what local projects do you want to work with, because there'll be so many amazing ones. And I think often it's starting small and building from there, and you'll already have a sense of what's important to you. Employer branding as part of that is, of course, also critical. We need to know that our community understand who we are, that we have a positive brand. That's not just for our customers and our community, but also when we're attracting people into our business, we want to be seen as somewhere that people want to work with, where their values align with ours. You could also consider working in local schools, for example. For Duncan and Topless, we are part of a programme called RISE, which is part of the accountancy profession ICAEW. And what they do is they work with different schools across the UK in socioeconomic areas. And it's about going into those schools with support from companies like ours, and really helping children from backgrounds where they don't necessarily have the same privilege to see how they can foster careers beyond school and see that the options that could be open to them, and it's to help through an education foundation to support that. So these are just some examples, and I think again it's trying to work with a few small schools and building that up if that's an area that's interests you. I think a really good tip as well is to think about what is your organisation good at and try and leverage that. So there will be skills in your particular area where you think we could really offer this to the community. So it might be networks. A lot of tech firms have created STEM workshops working with local schools, or there might be particular industries that in you where you can again create networks through that, or you can add certain training to develop people, perhaps younger people in those areas or in other underrepresented areas. I think most importantly is considering what you can do to add value rather than what you can gain, which I appreciate sounds quite obvious, but so with RISE, for example, who we work for, we're not going in there with a view that we're trying to encourage everyone to become accountants. There may be the odd one in there, but ultimately what we're doing is helping the community, which fundamentally is going to help all of us anyway. So the next area is the DEI, the diversity, equality and inclusivity, which is a really big area in itself and certainly a critical one to focus on. So DEI really enables us to build a sustainable company. It really helps us to put people at the heart of everything that we do, which for ESG is fundamental, because ESG is all about doing the right thing by the environment and people. So D&I therefore naturally is and has to be at the front of this. But where do we start with DI? I think again this is an area that can often feel quite overwhelming because there's so many areas to consider, there's so many things to do, and where do you put your time first of all? I myself, in fact, only this morning I head up a forum with other other organisations similar to our own, with other HR directors in that, and we talk about what we're doing in our own areas for DEI. And I find that hugely beneficial because we share ideas, we share what's working well, challenges that we've got, and we really talk through so that we're trying to build something together. And there's no doubt that we're learning more quickly because of that, rather than trying to do it all on our own. So one big tip always for everything like this is to create that network as well, or get involved with that. Other organisations will be doing great things. A lot of organisations will feel the same as where you are right now. And that's in itself really a nice feeling, that you know that other people also are having those challenges, and actually together you can really work forward. But certainly in terms of DEI, there are a few things that you could focus on. I think data collection is really important. You've got to know what your workforce looks like in order to be able to start that part of the journey, and how they compare to your local community. Now, collecting this data isn't too challenging. There's lots of resources around to support you with that, but it is sensitive data, and your team members are giving you that data. They don't have to, so it's something that we've got to then use as you know, the privilege that we have to have that data. So I think before you collect it, you always want to understand, what am I going to do with this? Am I ready to do something with it? So although you want to be able to do that quite early on, you also need to make sure that you're clear about where you're taking that data to, even if it's just that next step. Because the danger is otherwise you collect data, you don't do anything with it, and then later on when you want it again, that can be it can be difficult. You might break that trust. So, and that, you know, that's a challenge. So again, thinking about, why do we need this data and what can we do with it? Then it's really about looking at what your needs are. So think about your company. What are you already doing really well, which you will be doing lots of things really well, and where are the areas that it's not working as well and you'd like to develop on? One useful way to do that is to involve your employees. It is really your employees that are often going to have the answers for you. So make sure that you involve them either in a working group or through surveys, or a combination of those, to find out, what do they think are the issues? What would they like to see the changes? Often those small wins can really come from those team members. You can then consider things like your policies, procedures. Often they are old documents, something that we might have had in our company for some time now, an old handbook, old policies. But do they represent the company that you are today? You know, if they're the first things that often new people might read, what does that say about your organisation? Does it fit with your values, your DEI, etc.? And then again, it's around education. How do we make sure our team members understand DEI and their responsibilities? Because we all are responsible. How do we understand unconscious bias? Things like our own bias too, what we all have. How do we deal with that? How do we handle that? How do we educate ourselves on being someone that can work with different people? So elements of training, again, that can be through external sources. You can provide that, or if you have your own ability to do that. But that's something that certainly can really help build out once you start to all open that conversation up together. And then really, again, it's about you've reviewed what you want to do, you started to put a plan in place, and then you continue reviewing it. It's not something that really is ever going to start and stop, so it's just a constant process. And for me, it's all about making those marginal gains. We're never going to change everything in one go. You're always going to think, if I do this, what about that? So actually, it's just about focusing and then just keep working through. So the next thing really is employee well-being. Post-pandemic, this is an area that has really grown in importance. Happy, healthy and engaged employees certainly have a huge positive impact on any company, but we know that. But we are aware that well-being is also a really big business right now. I don't know about yourselves, but I am inundated every day with emails, LinkedIn, etc. People calling me, trying to sell me things for well-being. And it's amazing that there are so many fantastic firms out there that can help with these aspects, but it also can feel overwhelming again. But also there is a danger that we can start to chase the next shiny thing and just keep paying out for different things. And we all, of course, these times we need to manage our budgets, and actually spending lots of money is not in itself going to solve that, although there are companies that, you know, at time you want to make sure that where you are investing money, it's in areas that's going to really add value to you. And I think, firstly, the most critical point with wellbeing is to be really authentic about it, as being authentic about all of these aspects. Because if our employees are overworked, poorly managed, or feel that they have not a great work-life balance, then no amount of fun Sunday, Friday activities, or an ice cream on a Friday, or whatever it might be, they're not going to change that. So we need to make sure we work on our foundations first. So make sure we understand, what do our employees want? How can we start that conversation with them? What are their challenges? What do they see as most important for their mental and physical health? And how can we get those foundations right and then start to build from there? Make sure we understand morale, considering an employee survey, making sure we have strong health and safety practices. Ultimately, people are at their most comfortable when they feel safe and comfortable where they're working. Considering our flexible working practices, do they fit our needs now? A lot of us changed those during the pandemic and continue with those changes. Are they still right for us? Should we adapt them further? Are there steps that we need to take? Learning and development, again, is critical for this area as well. Do our managers have the skills to effectively manage the team members? Because ultimately the managers are those day-to-day people involved with our employees. So are they able to support? Do they understand how to deal with mental health issues with our employees? Are they able to deal with those effectively? Are they able to give feedback? Are they able to be really clear about what's expected to team members, help them develop as well? So again, it's all those foundational pieces that we can look at that can start to build that wellbeing journey. So I talked at the beginning about governance, as you see here, there's culture and values. And so for me, they go very much hand in hand. It's really about underpinning that S aspect. It's always critical that your culture aligns with your strategy, because ultimately if it doesn't, it's neither one will be achievable. And values really underpin this. So ultimately, if you're saying that you care about ESG, you need to show it through the aspects that we've talked about earlier, policies, procedures, practice, etc. It has to be shown there so that it becomes real. EDI, as I've talked about, is the most effective when embedded with the culture of your business. So creating an environment where employees are welcomed, heard and are represented is so important to our success. And so a focus on ESG can really drive employee engagement by having that clear connection, so they really understand what their purpose is and what they does matters to the organisation. We consider our board, as we mentioned earlier. It's so important that this is driven from the top. If we don't, as a board or as your managers or whoever's in control of your business, if they don't buy into this, it's going to be very difficult to achieve it. So we need to have someone pioneering that, someone that believes that this is important, because you need to understand what do you want for your business and where are you going to take it? And that will be different for every company. We don't all have to do the same thing. And then we consider our stakeholders as well. That engagement is so important. As I mentioned earlier, our employees generally are going to be the people that are going to have these great ideas. So make sure we utilise that and communicate this with them so that they feel they're very much part of that. So finally, I'm just going to cover the next steps with you. As I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure that we appoint a board social champion. So again, making sure that we're having someone driving that right from the top, and so that it can filter through. Make sure that we look at considering a group, so we can bring employees together to form, it can be a temporary group or a long-standing group for ESG and all different aspects. It could be one group, whatever works best for your organisation, your size of organisation. You're likely to have, or hopefully going to have in your company, people that are really passionate about this and have knowledge, people that you aren't even aware of at the moment that have this passion. They're the people that you want. They're the people that are going to help you drive it. They're going to be willing to put in a lot of time for it, rather than trying to work with people that this isn't such a key area for them. So, those people we can bring along the way, but really try and find those passionate people that can help you so that it doesn't feel it's all on your shoulders. As we mentioned earlier about conducting a review to think about your data, your policies, procedures, and fundamentally you want to think about is, what are you trying to achieve? And as I said at the top here, it's about your why. Why do you want to do this? We always need to understand why we're doing something to make it work. So why are we doing it? What are we hoping to achieve? Let's bring a strategy together so we think, What are we doing really well now? What do we need to work on? And then really break that down into really manageable steps, which you can then action as we go along and review. And I know that sounds quite simple. It's obviously not. It's quite a big piece of work. But like anything, if we break it down into smaller chunks, it can feel a lot more manageable. At Duncan Topless, we are very much on that journey. There's lots of work we're continuing to do. I absolutely feel those overwhelming feelings at times, but it is so important and so exciting as well. So it's something that there's a lot of people out there that can give support, and a lot of people you can network with. So it's about getting those networks together and helping each other through this journey. So that's all I've got to cover. It's just a bit of a whistle-stop tour. So thank you so much for listening. I'll hand back to Sally, and of course I'm around for questions at the end as well. So thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Heidi. I certainly have benefited from some of the amazing training that Duncan and Topless have offered in the last 15 years. It's always been varied and relevant to my role, so not always chartered accountant based, but also people based. The team are given the opportunity to get involved in many of our projects, and also we're constantly asked to give feedback and make suggestions to help drive the business forward. We can also see the impact that our fundraising has on local communities, which leads me nicely on to passing over to Niall Kingsley. Niall has been a key part in the creation of the Duncan and Topless Foundation, and I'm pleased to have him to join me today to discuss the creation of the foundation and the impact that it's having on our teams and communities in our local area. Thank you, Niall.
Thanks, Sally, and thanks, Heidi. That was some really interesting points there. I'll start off by apologising if you see me wincing during my little bit of the presentation. It's because I managed to injure myself playing football yesterday evening. I wish I could blame it on a bad tackle, but I think it's just a hazard of trying to play football in your middle age. Yeah, so thank you. I've been invited along today to speak about the Duncan and Topless Foundation, and just give a bit of an insight. It's obviously one small aspect of our overall ESG sort of policies and strategies at Duncan and Topless, but I thought it'd be useful just to give a bit of a background as to what the foundation is, how we started planning for it, why we're doing it, and what sort of benefits we feel it brings. Sort of leads me on nicely. Can I just get a thumbs up that you can see my slides? Thank you. Yeah, so we sort of describe ourselves as the sort of philanthropic arm of Duncan and Topless. We were incorporated in April 22, and we chose the charitable company by limited guarantee structure. We felt that was right for us, but of course, if you are considering something similar, you look into the different structures that are available and get advice and choose the one that suits you. We got our charity commission registration in April 2023, and whilst we are very much involved with the Duncan and Topless Group, it's important to sort of mention we are its own separate legal entity, and the reason I put that up there is just to flag to you that if you are considering doing something similar, then there is some very worthwhile guidance that I'd encourage you to read, prepared by the Charity Commission, and it's their guide to corporate foundations. And the reason I mentioned that is naturally, you imagine that with the sort of the linkage between your business and a possible charitable foundation, you may have employees on the board of trustees, etc., and you may have sort of transactions between the two, or people doing work for both. So there's some clear potential conflicts of interest there that need to be carefully managed. And if you are a trustee, as I am, for our Duncan and Topless Foundation, and along with the other trustees we have to clearly put on our our trustees hat, ignoring the fact we are some of us Duncan and Topless employees or directors, and really make sure that everything we're doing for the foundation is done with the best interests of the foundation at heart. Speaking of the trustees, there's some very handsome ladies and gentlemen there, just to let you know who the board of trustees of our foundation are, and we do look forward to others joining us hopefully in future. So a bit of background. Obviously this relates to Duncan and Topless as much as the foundation, but so Duncan and Topless, as you may well know, we employ almost 500 people with 11 offices currently across Leicestershire, Nottinghamshire and Lincolnshire. We were established in 1925, and obviously we have got a long history of providing charitable and sort of social support to our communities, and foundation was very much sort of an evolution of that. So we really started planning for the foundation in early 2021. The reasons for that, I mentioned the sort of long history. Many of our team members have raised money for various local and national charities. We often had sort of either team members doing it as an individual or in small groups at their sort of local office locations. Many of our team members give up their time voluntarily in various roles or forms. But we just felt there was a sort of opportunity to bring that sort of wider collective approach and the capabilities of the whole Duncan and Topless team, essentially just to try and sort of maximise that impact that we're having on our communities. We really thought by sort of collecting, having that joined up approach, we can sort of get a better sense of the overall, you know, not just fundraising, but the time we're giving and the impact we're having, and get some measurables for that, which just made it, we hope, easier to sort of communicate the successes we have, the good work that we do, and sort of drive that a team member sort of satisfaction and engagement. Sort of think from the perspective of what we're all seeing in terms of consumer choices nowadays. There are many people now looking at what companies are doing, what their cultures and values are, their environmental policies and the like, and you know, that is also happening more and more in terms of people choosing, you know, which companies they want to work for, and therefore we feel it's not the sole reason we're doing it, but one of the sub benefits is that we think it does help to attract and retain talent. If you are thinking, why do I need to work on my ESG policies or strategy? Well, there's I think one very good reason in itself. It also helps strengthen relationships with wider stakeholders, being the community, professionals, other companies that rely on you or work with you. And of course, it doesn't hurt to celebrate the good work we do and you know, boost the company image. So on this slide, you can see a few of the charitable organisation and community groups that the foundation have supported so far. I suppose taking it back a little step, how have we been raising our money for the foundation? We've been very kindly supported with donations from Duncan and Topless itself, but actually also from various fundraising events that we've put on, and very grateful to our team members that have continued to raise money in various forms such as sponsored marathons or coffee mornings and the usual things, but have made some very generous contributions and put those funds towards the foundation itself. We do have an online application form, so if you are involved with charitable organisation and you were thinking, how do we approach the Duncan and Topless Foundation for a potential grant, then I'd steer you to the Duncan and Topless website, and on there you will see a special section for the Duncan and Topless Foundation and an online application form. So we sort of start off, we've kept our charitable objectives quite broad to give us that flexibility, but we sort of narrow that focus in any given period to sort of 5 or 6 certain areas that we want to focus on in terms of our support. As Heidi mentioned here, presentation is very, very important to sort of engage with your team members, and similarly we do so at the foundation and very much reach out to our team when we sort of define those areas of focus in any given period. But as you'll see, we've supported some very good organisations that do great work in our area, and we do sort of focus across our sort of geographical remit, and really try and again just maximising that impact to our local communities. So what's next? What are we trying to look at in terms of taking the foundation forward? Well, one area we've been exploring is looking at, along with Duncan and Topless, the opportunities to join the payroll giving scheme. This is a scheme that an employer can sign up to through a payroll giving agency, and essentially it's like a salary sacrifice. So your employees would then be able to make donations as a deduction from their pay and get the immediate tax relief for those donations. So they're very flexible and open to all team members, and hopefully a good way just to again build that team member engagement and give them that sort of flexibility to make. I'm sure many of them are already making regular donations, and it just helps to facilitate their charitable giving. There are benefits as an employer for doing that. There are certainly the larger payroll giving agencies will give employer recognition schemes, so they'll give awards to you as an employer for being involved at various different levels in these schemes, which is obviously just another opportunity to sort of celebrate and communicate any good work that you're doing as a business. There's flexibility within these schemes, so as an employee you could choose, for example, a level of match funding for any donations that your employees give if you wanted to support in that way. It's not compulsory by any means, but there's the opportunity there. Or similarly, you might choose to fund the costs. So with the payroll giving agencies, they will tend to charge a commission to facilitate that scheme. It's usually a percentage of the level of donations, or it could be a sort of fixed fee per employee that's donating through that scheme. That might be a more favourable way to go, in the sense that it makes it easier as an employer to budget and anticipate the likely costs that you would be contributing. And of course, you may also internally have opportunities to celebrate or reward those employees that are taking part in such schemes. This is no way a promotion of those schemes. It was just, I thought, something useful to share that we were looking into ourselves and you may or may not be aware of these payroll giving schemes that are out there and becoming more common for larger employers. If you do want to see more information on that, I've put a link to the website there, the government website, which gives you some useful information, background to how the schemes work, and also the approved payroll giving agencies that you might reach out to explore further. I have to say we're still very much in the exploratory stage at this time, but having spoken to the payroll giving agencies, they were very helpful in terms of the information that they provided, any questions we had. So you to reach out if it's of interest. I think Duncan and Topless as a whole would like to support our clients further in these areas, starting with things like these webinars today, but generally obviously assisting some of our smaller client base who may not have the resource or might need some support there in terms of developing their own CSR programs. I hope there may be opportunities to widen the Duncan Topless Foundation and allow other businesses or organisations in the area to become part of the Duncan and Topless Foundation and work with us. We may, if we as we gain experience more and more with the things like the payroll giving scheme, be able to share that experience and expertise and assist our clients with advice or with setting up similar type initiatives. And of course, one of my hats at Duncan and Topless is head of charities. So if you are thinking about any charitable foundations and you need any advice on setting up and running charities in general, then please do reach out. So we don't obviously do the foundation or any initiatives just purely for recognition, but it is always nice to be recognised for the work we do, and I was pleased to recently find out that we have been shortlisted for the East Midlands Chambers Community Impact Awards. So just a nice little thing to share with you all today. And I think I probably just covered a bit of the background of what I wanted to do, Sally. So if you've got a question, I'll hand back to you to probably take us to the Q&A, I imagine.
Thank you, Neil. I'd also like to comment that the creation of the foundation does make it much easier for us as team members to see the contributions that we make to our local communities. Before, we were all busy doing our own thing and creating our own fundraising, but now we can celebrate the whole team's successes rather than just our own individual successes. We really are proud of the work that we do. And I'm sure you'd all agree that the type of support that we've given benefits our team members and also the wider communities. So fingers crossed our efforts are awarded in the Community Impact Award. So before we move on to questions, I just wanted to talk briefly about if you're thinking about starting your own ESG journey, what would we recommend? So trying to break it down into some small bite-sized pieces because it is no small feat. I think you probably need to consider where you are now. Consider what outcome you're looking for in the short, medium and long term. And then effectively you will have created a gaps analysis, so you'll know where your issues are. Most importantly, and Heidi focused on this, we need to consider about the tone from the top. So are our senior leaders or your senior leaders driving forward the changes and making it part of our strategy? It really needs to be authentic. We could take each strand of E, S and G separately and consider setting up internal teams who can drive forward each area. And as Heidi also said, we need to engage with the whole team. We need to ask them to get actively involved, working in groups or with the potential of surveys. And you really will be surprised at the team members who show an active interest. I certainly was. Also good to create a network of like-minded people. Like Heidi said, you can share your experiences, what went well, what didn't go so well. Overall, be careful that we're not greenwashing. We need to be really honest in our approach. It's no good saying we're doing this, this and this, but actually, if you dig a little deeper, that's not really what we're doing. And consider what external help you may need to drive your strategies forward. We are happy to assist you in any way we can, so please feel free to contact any of us anytime now or in the future. So on to questions. There is a bit more time if anybody wants to put any in the Q&A, but I already have a few. Oh, Neil, here's a tricky one. When did you start thinking of the foundation and how long did it take to set up?
Okay, so yeah, I think I mentioned in at the start of my bit that we'd sort of started planning it in sort of late 2020, early 21. You might have noticed from the slides that it wasn't established until April 22, and it wasn't actually registered with the Charities Commission until a year after that. So it hasn't been a quick process, and you need to allow for that. You know, you've got to consider how it's going to be structured, what form of legal entity it will be, who'll govern it, who will your trustees be, and obviously you've got work in the background to draft the required governing documents. Just opening a bank account, as we know, probably any business nowadays trying to do so. It's exactly the same for charities. That in itself is not a quick process and shouldn't be underestimated. The reason for the delay with the Charities Commission registration is until your income is over £5,000 in our particular structure, there isn't quite a requirement to register. Obviously, once you've reached that threshold, then you do need properly complete that registration process. That does take time. I think we started ours in January, and you'll see we got ours in April 23. So you know, that was a good 3-4 month process going through with the Charities Commission on that. It was slow, but I have to say Charity Commission were very good in terms of discussing with us, making sure we had the right policies in place. For example, that could, you know, the conflict of interest policies or grant making policies, all of those which are required to be sort of drafted and in place to sort of satisfy the Commission before they'll sign off on your registration. So it's not a quick process if you are thinking of doing it yourself, but certainly we can support you through that process if it was something you were thinking of doing, or if you want to reach out about working with our foundation, then please do so.
Thank you, Neil. One for Heidi. It's a tricky question. What have you found most challenging when considering the social aspect of ESG at Duncan and Topless?
Yeah, it's really hard to say the one thing. I definitely think it is the sort of magnitude of it at time. So rather than it being one individual thing, it definitely feels almost you think of one thing and then you think of the next and, oh, but what about this? Oh, but I've not done that. And how about that? And you really can get yourself into a bit of a spin for that. And actually you can get into a bit of a negative sense of, oh, we're not doing this and we're not doing that. And I think that's a danger that we can all get into with it, lots of things. But actually, so what I found is trying to pull that back and say, right, okay, what are we good at? And there is always a lot more than you think. So we tend to sometimes human think more of what we need to be doing rather than what we're already doing well. So for me, it's that. And then actually, it's almost taking one step at a time. That whole whataboutery piece is so critical. You're always going to have that no matter what you do. Someone will say to you, well, what about this? What about that? And actually, you've got to be sort of saying, well, look, we're not trying to chase the next shiny thing, because that can be very tempting as well. There's so many things that you can grab hold of with this. You know, oh, that sounds good. Oh, they're doing that. Let's do that. And actually, that's when you start to lose your impact and it becomes not very authentic and you sort of half do things. So I think it's sort of sitting down, as you said about a gap analysis, what are we doing well? What are we trying to achieve? And then what are the steps? And it's not about sitting rigidly to them, but actually keep ploughing in the one direction rather than being, you know, caught off guard with all the little things and not comparing yourself too much to others. Because as you said, narrative can be very attractive. Lots of companies will tell you all the wonderful things they're doing, but actually what we really want to be achieving is things that actually have real merit, because we can all make things sound good, but it's actually getting those foundations right. So I think, yeah, I've probably felt that's difficult overall, not constantly worrying about all the things that where we're not yet. So I would just definitely encourage everyone to take that step at a time approach.
Thank you very much. Another wide question. I'll be really mean and throw this one over to Neil. What does ESG mean to you?
Oof. It's a broad question. Okay, let me think. Well, I suppose starting off with I think what I understand the official definition to be is probably a good starting point. So obviously it's the environmental, social and governance standards sort of implemented to either limit a negative impact or think enhance positive impact on the environment, society and governance bodies. I think in terms of sort of me with my business Duncan and topless hat on, it touches so many strands of our business or any business, whether that's your sort of, you know, your team members themselves, your clients, your customers, your communities, whether it's doing what you can environmentally, you know, make it as environmentally friendly as possible, whether you're offering sort of job, employment, training opportunities in your local communities, supporting community groups or charities, as I've sort of mentioned. I think ultimately, for me, I bring it back to sort of gives our sort of businesses and our team members a great sense of purpose, great sense of satisfaction. We all want to sort of feel like we're just, you know, in our careers, we're doing that little bit just to, and it sounds a bit cheesy, but just help the world around us, make the world around us a little better. I think I mentioned before, it does seem more sort of relevant to applicants and team members when considering a sort of business as an employer of choice, whether they want to sort of stay with you, whether your cultures and values are aligned with theirs. So I think with that in mind, you know, it's how do you measure it, how do you articulate it, communicate it with your team members and wider stakeholders, how do you celebrate it? Yeah, I think it does have to be a more and more a significant sort of part of any kind of business's strategic planning. I think certainly it will make it easier to handle any of the sort of reporting requirements that large businesses starting to have, and no doubt will start to trickle down over time to SMEs. So I think to get a head start on that will certainly put you in good stead going forward. So if that was wishy-washy or answered your question, that's the best I could do.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I'd like to put you on the spot. A good one for Heidi. I think this will probably be our last question. Do you think smaller companies can compete with larger firms on ESG?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think at first it's you know, we see the multinationals, they'll have they'll have whole teams, they'll have people that it's almost full-time jobs, and that's relevant for that type of organisation. So sometimes I think when you try and compare that, you do think, oh gosh, how can we compete? But in reality, if we think about, you know, sort of Neil says, what does ESG mean? It's about doing the right thing by the environment and people, and actually we all can do something for that. So all of us have an impact. So whether we are a company with, you know, 2 or 3, 4, 5 people, or a few hundred or thousands, we might do it in different ways and different layers, and we've got to make it authentic to our company. But yes, I believe that everyone can do something, but it's about them feeling what's right for their company. We don't have to all do it exactly the same way or feel overwhelmed by having to do everything. But yes, I think we can all play our part and make those small changes that matter most to us.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So in conclusion, thanks everyone for your time today. We look forward to seeing you again. So on the 20th of November, we're starting to look at G for governance, and I'll be joined by the Director of Policy and External Affairs at the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment. I better put my teeth in before next time. Martin Baxter, and also the Head of Technical and Compliance at Duncan and Topless, Stuart Brown. So some of the topics that we'll be looking about on that day are integrating sustainability into your organisation, the benefits of addressing ESG and sustainability for SMEs, reporting on social impact, how organisations may still be impacted by EU legislation through their supply chain. So I think at the moment we all think that it's only EU and it doesn't impact on us, but it certainly will. An overview of the ISSB and the EU standards, and also the assurance standard that's currently under consultation, the ISSA 5000. And we're also going to have a look at the framework that delegates can use to evaluate climate-related risks, opportunities and financial impact within their organisations. So the link to register for that event can be found on our website under events. And please also remember that the E for environmental webinar is on our website under news if you'd like to catch up on that. If anybody has any questions in the meantime, please feel free to contact me at Duncan and Topless or anybody else. And we will issue a feedback form after the webinar, and we're happy to hear any unanswered questions or comments you have on this form. So once again, can I thank the 2 speakers and all of you for taking part in today's event. Goodbye.